Okay. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to our fourth HELIG Coffee Talk on the fourth industrial revolution. Is it a threat or opportunity for librarians? I am Dr. Kleinveld, and I'm the HELIG chair and also an academic at CPUT, and will be moderating the chat. So please feel free to type your questions and comments throughout the session. I'm very excited about this talk today. But just to explain a little bit about the purpose of the HELIG Coffee Talk sessions that we have on Friday afternoons, is to provide a space where we can engage informally online on various topics and issues in the field over a cup of coffee. And when the topic is heated, like the one we have today, it may lead to a round two of the discussion and may develop into hosting a workshop or hands-on training and so on. Now, I must point out that yes, indeed, today's session focuses on quite a hot topic. The rise of the fourth industrial revolution brought about great concern globally that robots will soon take over jobs. However, technological change is inevitable, and it is believed that new types of jobs will evolve. Just as the platform revolution at the start of the 21st century transformed the way organizations operate, shifting from the traditional pipeline or linear value chain to the complex value matrix, showed huge economic growth and sustainability. Pew Research Center predicts that by 2025, artificial intelligence and robots will be utilized more for domestic jobs such as cleaners and nannies. So what does this mean for academic libraries? Well, one might also argue that the fourth industrial revolution presents a plethora of opportunities as well as challenges for librarians. Who knows? Perhaps the benefits outnumber the implications. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Linda Mbonambi, an additional member in the HELIG committee, and her portfolio involves supporting the HELIG committee with running special projects in the area of information literacy. She is currently an information specialist for health sciences at the University of Pretoria, and I am pleased to inform that she is in the process of writing up a thesis for the Masters of Library and Information Science with the University of the Western Cape. Linda will introduce us to our guest speaker this afternoon, who will set the scene for us before we open the floor for discussion. The session will then conclude with a vote of thanks by our colleague, Mr. Marcus Mafili, an additional member in the HELIG committee, and his portfolio involves supporting HELIG with running special projects in marketing. Marcus is currently the Assistant Director in Library Marketing and Community Engagement at the University of the Free State. I will now hand over to Linda to introduce our speaker this afternoon. Thank you. Linda, over to you. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Thank you, Lynn, for such a very interesting background. And we're truly looking forward to the conversation around the fourth industrial revolution. I'm just going to introduce Sean Kruger, my colleague from the University of Pretoria, just a briefing around his background. So Sean is at the University of Pretoria. As I've mentioned that he's my colleague. He's got 14 years of experience within higher education, research and development, as well as ICT. He has ensured delivery of several projects towards innovation, development, and research output. Over this period, he has consulted across disciplines, channeled through the Innovation Hub, referred to as the Makerspace, where he is right now, which he has managed for the last 5 years. Sean is also a PhD candidate in information systems, specializing in fourth industrial revolution technology and its impact on the future of work and needed strategic changes. Welcome, Sean, and thank you for, for agreeing to do the presentation for us and have a conversation and debate around this topic. Over to you now, and you can take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Really appreciate the kind words, and good afternoon, colleagues. Lynn also has mentioned that this is quite a hot topic, and hence the discussion around today is assessing the landscape to grasp opportunities as well as navigate the threats. Because at the end of the day, there are great opportunities about this. That is what technology brings. But the arguments go around what are also the threats around it, because we need to be aware of what's happening, because we could be blindsided by the potential things that could happen in this 4IR. What has been noted about this paradigm is that it's so all-encompassing, hence also my field of interdisciplinary research, in that it's no longer just facilitated and focused on one area. It's rather broad and it goes cross boundaries. Now, that's where a lot of concerns are raised, because when people don't understand something, they usually fear it. So from our side today, I'm just going to briefly, because it is a Friday afternoon and I do have a cup of coffee here, I'm just going to go through an overview of the role of academic institutions and the 4IR, the benefits and considerations that we need to consider. Also, a very important side of things is the South African perspective, because a lot of the movement is happening globally. And I mean, from a library side of things, we do have to consider what is global movements, but there are, of course, South African nuances we need to be aware of. Then I'm going to just briefly review needed skills and core competencies that is based on academic literature, and more the fun part of what we can look functionally to do on an everyday basis within our libraries and academic institutions to leverage and channel these 4IR technologies. So first and foremost, academic institutions, we are known as custodians of knowledge. And in South African universities and those across the globe, by extensions libraries, we have a critical advantage to develop large-scale collaborations and innovation capacities of our students, and of course, those that leave and do come back to universities in research. However, due to this advantage, us as institutions are being pressured by government to develop graduates, as well as ourselves, who are ready for job roles that are constantly changing, as well as produce research outputs in an ever-competitive environment. This, alongside the COVID-19 pandemic, as of course we all are aware of, the advancing technologies and COVID brought on an amount of pressure and threats and uncertainties. This over and above the 41% of job functions that have the potential for automation. As mentioned by Lynn earlier, we're looking at robotics that are replacing job functions. So that is already exasperating a job unemployment area that is of concern. So as a result of this, we are currently in what we call a watch out economy, where we are lacking skills and infrastructure in terms of our challenges. Moreover, a key aspect is how we can support digital literacy, us as librarians as well, and access to information for future of work, especially when we need to consider, as we are broaching this digital environment, our competition is no longer just limited to the person next door. It's considered on a global platform because of the digital environment. So from a library perspective, as knowledge workers, how can we remain relevant and navigate this paradigm? After all, it can be argued that we ourselves need to be able to guide our actual users and stakeholders to remain relevant. Hence why it's such a nice discussion today. So first and foremost, what is considered the 4IR? Lynn did mention, so maybe she's cheating a bit. Luckily, it's a Friday afternoon before a long weekend. but it was actually popularized in the year 2015 going on 2016. It was late 2015, where the 4IR is an area where cyber-physical systems integrate with advanced technologies, as you might be aware, additive manufacturing, IoT, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, cloud computing, to optimize and create new forms of value. Interestingly enough about this, the fourth industrial revolution was preceded by Industry 4.0, which was coined in 2011 already. That was 11 years ago, almost longer than I've been studying. So from that sense, it's not completely a new concept, yet it remains disruptive in our engagements in an everyday environment. So the 4IR describes technology disruptions driven by automation of labor and increased digital connectivity, at the core of which are the technologies. Now, these advancements may be appearing a bit less in the African continent because not always perhaps conceived or construed correctly enough, as well as the facing of the challenges of the second and third industrial revolution. I had myself the other day had to plan for load shedding. That is considered a third industrial revolution challenge that we need to consider while still engaging in the fourth industrial revolution. So from that side of things, despite these challenges, the reason people look to the 4IR is because of the vast benefits it brings. From a operational side of things, and this can be in business, academia, or government, there are vast opportunities to improve operational efficiency. So think about predicting your maintenance, remote management, engaging meetings. So instead of me driving to the Free State or Cape Town, would have loved to be in Cape Town today despite the weather, we can engage in remotely and quickly access new things. There's also the emergence of the outcome economy. So think about your Uber, your Checkers, your quick access through digital platforms that can increase visibility of products, processes, and also create new access to customers. While I'm discussing this, just think to yourself as well, from a librarian perspective, what kind of outcomes and customers can you now reach that weren't before possible or engage in new ways? There's also, of course, new connected ecosystems, very much platform-based. So when it says here blurring traditional industry boundaries, that's what I mentioned earlier, where we need to compete on a global platform because despite our challenges in the African continent, we need to compete globally because the digital systems that we use sit on the same platform that we can access through the internet. And of course, the collaboration between humans and machines. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but the University of Pretoria had the Libby, the robotic librarian, where that interaction engagement between humans and machines was challenged and also made people think differently about what people do and should that be replaced, what is possible. So there are several benefits around this. However, there are, of course, the effects of the future of work. Looking at this heat map that was founded in the World Economic Forum in 2021, several areas, as you can see over here, from accommodation and food services, education services, we're right up there, right to health and healthcare, all the industries are quite disrupted. And you'll notice that there's several areas that are being displaced. Predominantly, it's above the 30, it's very concentrated in those that are already graduated. And that's quite a key area that needs to be considered today. And I might suspect a cause for some heated debates is where this is sitting, in that, yes, we need to make our graduates ready, but us ourselves need to consider the possible displacement of who we're servicing and, of course, the research areas that's happening. As mentioned, that we are looking into the 4IR as disruptive technologies it brings. That is a key focus because you can see and it's quite tangible. So disruptive technology and innovation, and that's key. Technology and innovation are synonymous to create new groundbreaking industry movements. If you have to think in 1997, a key disruptive technology then was email. Back nowadays, if you open your email box, you don't think it's disruptive, you think it's more disruptive to your life than anything else. But back then, to be able to send it and consider a letter instantly was considered quite disruptive. So when we look at the technologies that it brings, Industry 4.0 conceptualized these concepts of an interconnected system known as a cyber-physical system that brings together technologies in new ways. Part and parcel of this is the Internet of Things. So every device that you see here can be considered an IoT device because a physical device that can collect data and communicate with one another. We usually see this as manufacturing, but if you have to consider your library floor, how would you see it and how would you be able to integrate these kinds of technologies? Now, even though you might not see it or you're already thinking about ideas, this is either going to happen or is happening without you being aware of it. Hence the importance of having these kinds of discussions so that we can optimize and leverage these technologies to our benefit as well as our clients. As I've mentioned, the Internet of Things is those small physical devices. Yes, your cell phone can be considered an Internet of Things device. What makes them so unique, not unique, but quite impactful in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, is there are various forms of IoT. We focus more on consumer IoT, so think your smart homes. Your Libby can be considered part of robotics and IoT, where it can look to assist the elderly, communicate, security protocols. We recently had an IoT device that was integrated into cement. The reason for that being, if there's a break in your wall, it's a security measure. So we're looking to integrate various forms of Internet of Things technologies within our university and academic research to create new forms of value. The big issue with this is the sheer number of devices we are dealing with. General Electric Association actually estimated 25 billion devices by 2025. It's only 3 years away. Ericsson estimated that we would have had 30 billion by this year. Norton said 25 billion devices by 2020. Notice a key trend here. Despite these being large organizations with key data insights, no one can agree to the very amount of devices that are interconnected based on their capabilities. But what is known is that they are happening and they are impactful in what they can offer us. Not surprisingly, our applications go not just beyond higher education, but across transportation, healthcare, waste, allowing us to advance effect in our digital human workforce, which is key for us as librarians, but also advancing automation. Now, when you consider advancing automation, as I've mentioned, Libby, what did that advance? What did that automate? Just questions that we can perhaps look to keep for our debate later on. But most importantly, and this is where we'll also just see, Lynn, if everyone's still listening, is what about South Africa? So now I've spoken about the 4IR and what's all these great things, but what about South Africa and the South African perspective? Sorry, I just need my cup of coffee there. So as you look to, as mentioned earlier, we are in what you call a watch out economy, where we have several infrastructure gaps. In our major cities, we do have 5G rollout and those kinds of infrastructure. But as soon as you start to go to out of metropolitan areas, there are several gaps in infrastructure, especially about connectivity. And connectivity is so important because the 4IR is considered an interconnected and integrated amount of technologies. So without connectivity, we're already putting ourselves at a disadvantage. At least despite this and these barriers, there is at least enthusiasm for a digital future, not only in South Africa, but across several African countries, as well as areas such as Pakistan and Sri Lanka. If you look at the potential for us to innovate, we are known as currently followers in the current innovation environment. We are breaching into a championship environment and we are hovering at the middle. But there is high potential for us to go further, drive production and drive possibilities. It's up to us as knowledge-eccentric custodians to guide our users to drive research outputs as well as potential business spin-offs, intellectual property using these kinds of technologies, making it so impactful. But as I did mention, one of the big laggers from South Africa is if you look at the internet penetration rates, which is part of the connectivity area, we are under 50%. And we are considered major laggers in that regard, giving us a major barrier to leverage these kinds of technologies. Moreover, the official unemployment rate was 35.3% in the last quarter of last year, notwithstanding the real matric pass rate of 51.4% when you consider the dropout rate. So the South African economy over and above that, we still have load shedding, as you're aware of. There are major challenges in our context that we need to consider over and above while we need to still compete in a global market, making it that much difficult. We're almost at a disadvantage. Despite this, we are seeing South African leveraging 4IR technologies across various industries: gaming, e-commerce, digital services, fintech, and of course, education. So as from our side of things, we are looking to innovate using these technologies, and it is happening despite the challenges. So even though I've given you a bit of a depressing picture on a Friday afternoon, there are also very good things happening from our side. So to leverage the 4IR, there's been several studies on the core competencies from not only a global perspective, but in South Africa as well, of what is required. From a global perspective, we are looking to management and leadership, as is structured with several ICT and information systems design and informatics, critical thinking and decision-making, project management. Key area over here is our basic digital skills. As mentioned, we have several challenges. Part and parcel of that is digital access and literacy. But once given the opportunity, we've seen advancements in those areas. From a core competency side of things, these slides will be made available to you. Key to which is innovation, because technology and innovation are so synonymous. But to be able to create and think about what to create, how to create, we need creativity. Using and combining those things to make it serious, integrating business and technology skills. Now, a lot of the times you might think that, yes, I'm an academic librarian, but we are moving into an area where we need to describe our value. Just by show of hands, let's quickly see who's listening on this coffee talk. Who of you have needed to justify your department, motivate why you need something, even though you know there's value? How many of you have needed to actually motivate what you do just to demonstrate that you actually are adding value back to the organization? That's the thing. So a lot of people might think, yes, but it's business skills. Those business skills is part and parcel to basically demonstrate the value that you can add. Again, those technology skills of how it integrates and implements. And then, of course, how we communicate that to our leadership. How do we engage and articulate, this is why we need these technologies. This is why we can take these technologies and create new forms of value. Part and parcel of that as well is networking. From personal experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing this in the debates or the conversation rather, is leadership communication and networking. The graduates I deal with, although they are quite intelligent, I'm not saying they're not intelligent, I see them struggle to articulate what their value is or what they're trying to achieve or how to ask a question. They're almost rendered catatonic on how to just discuss something with me, let alone about the 4IR. But with COVID, those skills, those human skills are almost being lost. So a lot of times we always jump to technology, and it is important. I love tech, make no mistake. But the softer skills form part of these frameworks. And that's quite an important aspect to remember as we engage. The technology is important, but not everyone needs to become a programmer. Or even a programmer or a developer needs to be able to articulate what their business value is. Now, on a happier note, first core competency here is innovation, as I've mentioned, because of its synonymy with technology. So we can look to new disruptive business models. So us as librarians, what new forms of value can we add? Being agile, cloud system integration, so how we can create and access our clients in that sense. Also clear strategic measurements, as well as measuring our innovation. But you might ask what innovation is in the context of the digital 4IR world. Well, it's a key force for economic growth and development. So not only can it lead to greater efficiencies and productivity, but also it changes the way how our products and processes impact our individual lives. So what do you see as innovation? We might a lot of the times see the physical libbies and the additive manufacturing and everything that we get to do, and it is great. But there are various forms of innovation that the 4IR can do. And the issue with librarians are amazing work is being done, but it's not always showcased or seen and subsequently appreciated, which makes the environment that we operate in so difficult sometimes, because despite being innovative and driving technologies, because the back-end system, no one sees those upgrades, no one sees those kinds of things. So coming into more a practical side of things is, I consider just for today, what can we do on a functional level to stimulate innovation to navigate the 4IR? This was done from an academic perspective, so to drive research, teaching, and learning, both from a higher education perspective, but also a librarian side of things. From this, 4 key areas came to mind. To support ideation and ultimately innovation is we need to give a voice or face to our efforts. So whether it be a specific unit, the danger with a person, though someone might leave or change roles or those kind of things, but give a voice. I'd like to innovate. I'd like to integrate these technologies. We also need to look to collaborate within our ecosystems. So we are librarians, hence why I also sit in the library. We are at the center of cross-disciplinary research, but there are also ecosystems beyond our academic institutions and between ourselves that we can look to leverage. There are, of course, also access to key technologies that we can introduce ourselves as well as our users to them. And of course, ensure staff competence, because how can we engage and demonstrate the technology's possible integration or creation of efficiencies if we're not able to articulate that ourselves? So giving a voice to innovation, I'm going to use us as an example because it's quite a nice thing just to always use case studies, is through the makerspace. If someone has an innovation thought or concept or wants to use a technology or introduce it, we are the center or give that voice to innovation, not only within the library perspective, but that of the academic institution as well. Where we can't assist someone as a librarian, you can engage and at least refer someone to a knowledge-centric environment, knowing if I don't know, but I know someone who does. So in that sense, we give a voice to innovation of, we are innovating, this is how we're doing so. Now, if you have to consider through the COVID-19 pandemic, I was a client-facing environment. That's, it's part and parcel of our services. Yes, we offer a strong, and I'm sure a lot of libraries offer both a physical and virtual presence. But during COVID, I was forced to change how we offer our services. So we did the COVID PPE rapid prototyping in that sense to engage, as well as physical consultations. But if you have to consider, so this is additive manufacturing, rapid prototyping with 4IR, great. But from more an important side of things, and I'm going to just take a little bit of time here, is the digital side of the 4IR, as mentioned earlier. This is the back end of what you would consider an AI chatbot, which actually integrates with Libby, the robot. We use TensorFlow as one of the multiple platforms to integrate and do logical flow of machine learning of voice recognition. Now, what that does is it allowed us to take the platform that Libby can speak and communicate and integrate that with the online system, so that students can ask questions and alleviate certain job functions because everyone else was so overwhelmed with several other areas to address. So the benefit of these technologies is it can automate several functions, allowing you to address other areas. However, what's required from our side is to conceptualize, not immediately fear these technologies, but think, how can we optimize and integrate them to alleviate certain functions that take our time so we can again focus on our clients. That is just one example of how we activate the innovation channel for our using various technologies. Another one of this sense is to collaborate. So yes, this was pre-pandemic. Please no one scream at me. There's no masks here. This was pre-pandemic. But collaboration, the sense
this is the only one yeah.
So in the sense of over here, sorry,
from me myself.
Sorry, colleagues, could you please remain muted? Thank you. Sorry, Sean.
No, it at least gave me a chance to drink my coffee. No rush.
Okay.
Friday afternoon. So collaboration in that sense is because you have a voice for innovation, you can also look to collaborate certain functions and channel upskilling that's required in new and novel ways. Now, this is not to say that you need to overlook basic training in the sense of copyright and plagiarism. By all means, colleagues, those skills are still needed. I've seen students give me reports, just no. But collaboration allows us to integrate and also not necessarily do the most novel and integrate AI and machine learning, but to maybe start to think about what we could do. What we can also do in terms of collaboration is, this is one area where we utilize 3D scanning to integrate and optimize mechanical engineers of all things. So this is where a library makerspace interact with mechanical engineering as well as the natural sciences to create new research outputs using novel technologies. Part and parcel of that is 3D scanning. Now, 3D scanning is a discussion that we can have on a whole other day, because that allows us as librarians to start to digitize and digitally preserve 3D objects, no longer just books. And when you start to unravel and unpack that, the opportunities and possibilities become quite wide. Another function that I mentioned is the support of research through technology and expertise. Now, this was specific example was for the dentistry to integrate, and they could actually practice on the skull to rebuild and re-articulate what kind of breaks would be needed to rebuild this person's jaw. So hands-on experience using these kinds of technologies. This one was for the Internet of Things. Unfortunately, this plant has died because I didn't code it properly. We all learn. But in that sense, it's how we start to integrate these technologies. Mistakes can be made, but it can happen that we can learn from our mistakes, and at least now it's version 2.0 is working well. But part and parcel of that is when people start to see this, they see the possibilities, the integration, what's happening about, yes, it is difficult, but it's quite possible from the other perspective, given some time to think about what's possible. Another area in our sense that we look to is teaching and learning through collaboration. So we directly look to go towards, yes, additive manufacturing, nice example, but how do you start to take these technologies and integrate them to make a more enriched learning experience beyond the classroom? Perhaps these can be, if I remember correctly, these models were distributed digitally, so that although they couldn't physically see and touch it, they could actually view it through a digital world, zoom and create to conceptualize their teaching and learning in a much better and conducive manner. I'm almost done talking on this Friday afternoon, so don't worry. More importantly is what we can do from a strategic perspective. Is with these novel technologies that are disrupting our environments, we need to first look to define and measure our innovation capabilities with these technologies. A lot of the times people put down a makerspace or an innovation environment and give a voice to it. But because it's not being measured, we don't know successes. We don't know if it was helpful or impactful to the community. So first and foremost is when engaging in the 4IR and using these novel technologies, look to note what your innovation capacities are and measure them. Most important is balance this new novel technology with the need to improve. Because a lot of the times we can look to improve basic ICT systems and information systems. And I'm sure that's part of the debate today is we can look to optimize access before buying a 3D printer. So that balance between adoption into the new technology for IR, but making sure our existing systems work is of vital importance. We can also look to use innovation to create new channels of access. As I'd mentioned earlier, how do we engage with our clients? How do we provide them information? How can we change the services or automate certain areas to create new channels of innovation that we can look to have more time and capacity to actually do these kinds of things? Part and parcel of that is how we look to improve and develop our ideas, but more importantly, execute them. Because as you're conceptualizing and you have these great novel ideas, how do you actually take them and make them a reality? because an idea that sits in a drawer is just wasting space and time. And of course, as I've mentioned, get ready to fail, but ensure you also have successes to overcome and demonstrate that your activities actually bring forth value and impact within your environment. So you can look to create spaces and channels to do so, which we've done in this sense, but not everyone needs a makerspace. They can perhaps look to develop a digital online platform to channel these novel technologies or to do these upskillings. Biggest mistakes that have been made to date in this sense is no definition of what innovation is, and also a lack of clarity around what we're innovating and why we're doing so within the 4IR. There's no innovation framework, we have no ideation areas, and we're also sometimes too hard on ourselves, because with the plethora of technologies brought on by this concept, there are several threats that's out there. And because you feel so overwhelmed, you just decide, no, this is not for me. But if you just start to engage and start to conceptualize and see the opportunities, there is so much that can be benefited from integrating with this new paradigm shift. Ultimately, and the most important thing we can do is look to incorporate participation in programs that are already underway, as well as forums where these skills can be applied. And this includes us as librarians and our staff and competencies. Engage in the community, see what's happening, and also ask, what are you doing? What's best practices? Where have you failed? So that those mistakes aren't made by yourself, that you can leapfrog. And that is the key word and takeaway from today. How can we as South Africa leapfrog using these technologies? Because despite the challenges that we have with this paradigm shift, our collaboration and capabilities to do more has been exponentially enabled if we are able to do so. So that's the end of my slides and talks. Colleagues, there are references, don't worry. So that is the discussion points from my side. Lynn, would you like to facilitate some? I'm sure there's some questions on this area.
First of all, thank you, Sean, for really presenting really informative aspects on 4IR, really setting the scene this afternoon, highlighting as much as we still face the challenges, but the opportunities that these key technologies present to us. So thank you very much for that. Colleagues, this is now the opportunity for us to engage. Let us now hear from you. What are your questions, your thoughts, your concerns regarding the fourth industrial revolution, technologies, and the way forward? I would maybe, while we wait for comments or questions, Sean, you know, what stood out for me, I made some notes, but the one key point that we really need to consider is the striking the balance. You know, I think that is where most of us have a bit of a challenge. We become overwhelmed with all these new technologies, and we think to ourselves, oh, how are we going to even deal with this, and what is the best way forward? And then we go into a panic. But I think the key thing here is that we should strike that balance. We need to identify how best these technologies complement what we are doing so that we remain relevant, and that we shift that mindset of that fear that these technologies are taking over and going to take over our jobs, but to rather see how we can complement what we are currently doing. That for me, I think it's key to strike that balance, how to blend the old with the new. I think on higher education side, that is the main focus among academics right now, is just how best to blend the old with the new.
Definitely, and I'll agree with you. While we just wait for final comments and our colleagues to just formulate what their thoughts are, is how do, with all these technologies, like I've mentioned, I mean, that was a lot to take in a very short amount of time. Now you need to think, okay, but I still need to do my job. The system in the back end still needs to run. How does open access work? Who's the current trends in this? Who's the procurement manager? Who do I talk to? That is still happening. And like you said, how do we strike the balance between incorporating and optimizing using these technologies whilst maintaining our operational services? Because that doesn't stop.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure the colleagues can agree, your day-to-day job doesn't stop while you're trying to learn and figure out these new technologies. Now it's expected that you learn what an additive, what a 3D printer is, okay, how it works, and then of course, why. Then write the motivation while this is happening. Still do your day job and deal with clients and to those kind of things. And it's such a difficult concept to do. There are great opportunities. Like I've mentioned, we can optimize certain areas, but our time and capacity as people, it's, you know, you can only be stretched so thin. So it's definitely a point of concern, especially for librarians who are almost thrown to the wayside sometimes of, you're there, but you now need to be the expert quickly of, oh, I heard about they 3D printed an ear component. And suddenly you need to be the expert, Linda, you being in health sciences. Cool, what is 3D printing and how does it work? You've gone from an information specialist that you've studied years and done that. Now you're throwing the deep end. Cool, you 3D printed ear. Can you help me? You know, how do you deal with those kind of things?
Absolutely. And it once again brings us to that point of we constantly required to do more with less, and especially our time now is always limited, but yet we now expected, as you just mentioned, to do over and above the day-to-day operations. We need to, in order to remain relevant, need to take on these things. We need to learn faster, and it's a challenge. I attended an international conference a few years ago where librarians presented, and this came up that if you are not willing to, as you are growing older, if you are not willing to adapt to the changing technologies and learn and keep up with the pace, then it's they find themselves heading to a point where they are becoming useless in the library. Now, it sounds quite appalling that, you know, two librarians at that stage made such a bold statement, but is this really the reality, that if we are not willing to learn and adapt, are we going to become useless? And how then do we strike that balance between the operational versus needing to learn new technologies? So yes, definitely a challenge. But I think what can assist us here, colleagues, is collaboration. Because through collaboration, I believe that we don't have to take that burden on ourselves. That, you know, we work together, and I do this part and you do that part, and when we put it together, it completes the picture. So definitely look at how best we can collaborate and to make this work based on our circumstances that we find ourselves in, the challenges, but also look at the opportunities and how best to remain relevant. I see there is a comment in the chat by Cornelia. I think it is about the balance mentioned. You do need to know how 4IR is influencing your work and what you could possibly incorporate, but we cannot all be experts in everything. So yes, the collaboration as well, and relax, enjoy it a little bit. Definitely, Cornelia, I think that's the way to go. You know, wanting to do all of this on our own, Sean, I'm sure you agree with me. It's not possible to just want to take it on individually. That we need to work together, unpack it. You know.
No, definitely. And I mean, as librarians, we should feel comfortable talking to one another, saying, hi, listen, having these conversations, asking a colleague, listen, have you heard about 3D printing? That's fantastic. How can I articulate and relate that to my field of the natural sciences, engineering, theology? I'm still working on 3D printing. That's not, that hasn't come up yet, but making it not, I wouldn't like to use the word fun, but taking the fear away. Because the moment, as with anyone who's willing to do that, and that's where that lifelong learning comes in. If you drop those walls of, I'm not willing to try this or test it, and you approach it in a fun manner and you go, you struggle with X, Y, or Z. Did you know that this technology can do it? And you see that person see, my frustration as a user can be addressed. You adding value. And even though it will be difficult to learn this technology or engage with it or figure out how it works, because there's value add to my life, I'm willing to learn about it, which again comes back to us as librarians and higher academic institutions is we then have positive impact on our, not only our graduates, but our entire environment. So that's also what makes it so important is seeing, there's Mara, thank you so much. It's just so interesting to see how we can integrate. There we go. There's a librarian helping me. And that's where our role is. By the time someone comes to us and asks us for information, you know, they've broken that barrier of, okay, I need help. So it's our jobs to kind of at least be to a point of we know where to access information or access points of collaboration.
Thank you, Sean. Colleagues, are there any questions, comments? Linda, I see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to say what might be the comment, Sean and Lynn. Maybe it's something that you've already mentioned from the conversation that you have already said, but I was just asking myself that, do you think individual or collective mindset might be also another core factor that will drag the development effort industrial revolution within our academic libraries?
Linda, if I may address this, you're asking a very heated question. That is very heated. And to answer it and address it, I've actually done 2 studies recently, and I'm going to give you a global perspective. The organization needs to be ready and willing to learn. The organization. And that includes your top management support, which gives you resources to learn, whether it be time, money, funding. We need to look at this from a macro level that organizations, government are channeling resources to be able to engage in the 4IR. So from a corporate or business environment and in higher education institution, we need the support of our management. But then it also comes down to a bit more, I'm going to use the word selfish, individual level constructs. Our willingness to learn, and part and parcel of it, quite interesting from my recent studies, is risk. What are you risking in terms of learning that technology? Now, people don't think about this all the time, but I risk looking incompetent. And I deal with this, I'm sure we might have seen it. I'm now currently almost wrapping up my PhD. Now I'm a doctor. So now the expectation for me to be knowledgeable in the 4IR is there. But the 4IR is so all-encompassing. By the time I'm done, there can be new technologies. Now the risk here is that I look incompetent in the field of my expertise. So it needs to be a two-way street there between the organizational support and an individual ready to accept part of, hence innovation. I'm ready to fail, but what I succeed in far outweighs those failures. So it's a two-part discussion there. And that's why I say it's so heated. Because if you are willing to learn and innovate and try, it's great, it's amazing. But if you don't have the support of your organization, that's exactly where it falls flat. And that goes both ways. If I'm an organization driving, I've seen a lot of institutions driving innovation. It's incredible and I love it. But if your staff complement isn't skilled or willing to learn, both fall flat. So it is a symbiotic relationship both ways.
Thanks, Sean. You're spot on there. Definitely, yes, the buy-in, but also the willingness. But the one important thing I want to just add to what you mentioned now about obtaining a PhD, and it is kind of funny that the expectation is out there that once you obtained your PhD, you know everything. It's impossible to know everything, colleagues. Believe me, I've been there, Sean. I suddenly received an influx of questions and queries and this and that. No, unfortunately, it does not make one genius and that you know everything. Yes, you have specialized in a certain aspect, but if you look at everything else in the world, then what you have focused on is a tiny bit compared to everything else. But what is important about this is that being able to say that okay, what you are asking me now, I'm not too familiar with this aspect, but I'm willing to learn and find out and get the answers, etc. I think it's that, you know, just being able to say, I'm not so sure about this, but I'm willing to learn. That already is a step in the right direction, because it's impossible to know everything. And once we've realized that, I think then, you know, we just make the world a better place, that we work together and we say, you know what, we're willing to take this on, to learn, to see, to explore, you know, and not be scared to do that. But yes, what's important is also to have the support from your institution, from management, etc. And one see that in the success stories is where, you know, the support is there and the willingness to learn and to explore is there. Then one can see how in the success stories that we read about every day, that it's a combination of that. So thanks. Are there any other comments? Gerald, I agree. To make technologies work in libraries, librarians and other stakeholders must collaborate. Yes, definitely. Marcus, the introduction of 4IR and emerging technologies in the LIS requires staff reskilling and formal training. The unwillingness to learn might hamper progress. Yes, LIS staff development strategies within institutions must also reflect the move to, and professionals will follow. Dialogues within libraries will assist towards dealing with the fears. Thank you, Marcus. Yes, that's spot on. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I see Susan has just posted a comment. We basically remain connectors, connecting information or resources to clients, and our basic skills are there. We must just broaden our horizons. Absolutely, Susan. Any other comments, questions, colleagues? Sean, I was just interested. You in one of your slides, you mentioned using a TensorFlow. If I understood it correctly, this is a system that the users could interact online with Libby, so without physically coming to the library during COVID. Did I understand that correctly?
So that is the chatbot functionality of Libby. So it actually, it's the same interface. The difference between that and Libby is the physical manifestation of the AI. That's where that 4IR interconnectivity comes around. Of that system is called machine learning. It learns the languages that people ask. So the word, hello, how are you? The AI configures that if I ask, what level is this book on? That's the intelligence going as a human would, again, emulating intelligence. Go to level 6 on this level. We use the Dewey Decimal System. Great. The physical manifestation of that AI was through Libby, whereas you could still interact and ask the same questions through the web interface at that stage. But that's the back-end system that no one sees. So hence that whole integration of how everything comes together, of how you create value through different mechanisms.
Okay, so through the TensorFlow, were users then able to ask their questions online during the time that the library was closed, and this technology, instead of Libby, the physical part of it, was still able to interact with the users?
Yes, so it was the chatbot functionality that you could ask Libby, where's the book? How are you? What are you doing? It's exactly the same, just in a different interface.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Sate Abati from University of Eswatini posted a comment, cataloging head. Oh, you are the cataloging head. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. Just want to know your opinion as librarian. What do you think the fourth industrial revolution is an opportunity? Is it an opportunity is the question.
Yes, there is, because we can automate several functions of what we do, whether it be to address certain queries, what times are you open, channeling general areas of when you do search criteria, optimizing those searches for users as Google did back in the day. So yes, there are opportunities to engage from a library perspective, but also, again, us as librarians introducing these kinds of opportunities for researchers where they can be taught to code and integrated to advance their research. Us as library needs to be able to channel, as mentioned, channel expertise and guide our users on how to achieve those things. But those things are just now just so much more accessible. Rapid prototyping using these technologies has expanded. Hence, there is definitely an opportunity for us librarians to not only innovate in our own processes, but also help our clients to do so in their respective fields.
Thank you, Sean. And on that note, I will now hand over to Marcus just to do the vote of thanks and also to conclude the session. Unfortunately, Sean and colleagues, I need to step out now as I have another meeting. So I will hand over to Marcus that will continue the session and also conclude with the vote of thanks. But once again, thank you very much, Sean, for an informative presentation and engaging with us this afternoon. Really appreciate it. And colleagues, thank you for your participation. I unfortunately need to say goodbye to all of you. Have a lovely long weekend. Over to you, Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Can you all see me?
Yes, we can. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much to Lynn, Linda, and my fellow colleagues in the HELIG team for organizing this coffee talk. One can say the topic was definitely spot on based on the challenges we're facing in the library and information services and the evolving landscape. One maybe for some odd reason must also thank COVID pandemic for pushing us towards embracing 4IR, because I believe that many institutions were compelled to make funds available towards ensuring that we move towards that space. So in a very odd way, thank you very much, COVID, apart from everything. Obviously, one must consider challenges of unstable power supply. You know, it's a stumbling block towards 4IR, and thank you to ESCOM. And obviously, prophets of doom will be singing that the issue of bandwidth and challenges of cost to data will hamper and make 4IR unreachable to many. But who cares? I mean, at the end of the day, we have to move towards that direction, because for some reason our users have smartphones in their pockets with all sorts of softwares that makes them ready towards moving towards 4IR. So we rather than move into that space, because already the number of smartphones in the country tell us that the country is sort of to a certain extent ready towards embracing 4IR. And I mean, with petrol price this high, who want to drive to the library? So 4IR, here we come. We must embrace you, we like it or not. Obviously, it is time for us in the LIS profession to slowly begin to embrace 4IR, because without it, our users will move elsewhere and will be saying, we once had users and 4IR took them. And our jobs, as we mostly fear, will become null and void. Mr. Sean, thank you very much for telling us that what do we see as innovation. Thank you for telling us how to stimulate innovation. And thank you for starting a conversation around 4IR. And I'm hopeful that you will remain part of the LIS community, irrespective of where you are, to continue assisting us towards embracing 4IR and most importantly, understanding this elephant in the room. For those who have studied early in the 90s, obviously, in the 80s, 4IR remains a very big elephant. Last but not least, thank you to all of you, my colleagues, for making time to attend this event. I mean, it's almost the eve of a very long weekend, and I'm sure some of you are supposed to be on the roads. Thank you very much for making time, for being here. It shows the value that you put in the event that we created for you today. So thank you very much. Back to Linda.
Thank you, colleagues. I think this is the end of our session, and the recording will be shared to everyone. I just want to say to Sean, thank you so much for the presentation. I feel like you've just pressed a certain button which needed to be pressed, and we've moved up a little bit in our comfort zone with your presentation. So thank you so much. Yeah, so we'll share the presentation to everybody. Thank you.